3 days, 72 hours, 4,320 minutes of hiding 3 shattered ribs, a punctured lung slowly filling with blood, and a body that begged for death every time she dared to breathe. That's how long Mia Bennett had been dying in plain sight. 3 days since Derek Harrison, the 44-year-old director of operations who collected women like trophies and discarded them like trash, had dragged her by the hair across a dark parking garage and beaten her until her own reflection became unrecognizable. 3 days of painting over purple and black bruises with 5 layers of concealer. 3 days of binding her broken ribs with bandages she bought with her last $20. 3 days of biting through her own lip to keep from screaming every time she moved, smiled, or pretended everything was fine. Because Mia Bennett could not afford to break. Not today. Not ever. Not when her 19-year-old baby sister Rose was lying in a hospital room with a failing heart, counting down the days until a surgery that cost $300,000. Not when the debt collectors called 6 times a day about her dead mother's medical bills. Not when her landlord had already changed the locks on her apartment and thrown her clothes into the street. Not when this job, this single paycheck, was the only thread keeping her sister alive. So Mia swallowed pain like medicine, wore her trauma like armor, and walked into work every morning, pretending she wasn't already a ghost. But here's the thing about broken bodies. They don't care about love or sacrifice or desperate prayers whispered at 3 a.m. And on that 3rd day, standing in the middle of the most critical quarterly meeting of the year, presenting data to 20 powerful executives who could end her career with a single word, Mia's body finally staged its mutiny. Her vision blurred, her legs buckled, the world tilted sideways. She fell, but she never hit the ground, because something caught her. Someone, hands wrapped around her waist before she could shatter against the marble floor. Massive hands, covered in tattoos of serpents devouring roses and thorns dripping blood. Hands that had crushed windpipes and signed billion-dollar contracts with the same cold precision. Hands that belonged to the man sitting at the head of the table. The man no one dared look in the eye. The man whose name was whispered like a curse in the dark corners of New York. Matteo Valenti, 36 years old, CEO of Valenti Corporation, billionaire before 30, the Viper of New York, the shadow king of the Italian mafia, who owned judges, senators, and souls across the entire eastern seaboard, the man who had watched Mia Bennett from the shadows for 8 long months, fascinated by the fire in her eyes and the steel in her spine. The man who now held her broken body against his chest and felt something he hadn't felt in 20 years. Rage. Not at her. For her. In that frozen moment, surrounded by executives too terrified to breathe, Matteo Valenti looked down at the woman bleeding quietly in his arms and made a vow that would rewrite the rules of his empire. Whoever did this would pray for death long before he granted it. And this woman, this stubborn, foolish, magnificent woman who had been fighting alone for so long, would never fight alone again. While many girls hold out for a prince on a white horse to rescue them, Mia Bennett was about to find her sanctuary in the shadow of a devil dressed in Armani. And sometimes, when the world has already taken everything from you, a monster's protection is the only salvation that matters. If this hook already has you hooked, hit that like button right now. Share this with someone who needs to believe that sometimes darkness protects better than light. And subscribe because what Matteo Valenti does next will change everything you think you know about dangerous love. Because when Mia opened her eyes in his penthouse, she had no idea that falling was the easy part. Staying would cost her everything, and walking away was no longer an option. The scent of sandalwood. Sheets soft as clouds, gentle light slipping through the curtains. Those were the first things Mia sensed before she opened her eyes. And the instant her lids lifted, panic crashed down like a tidal wave. This wasn't her shabby apartment. This wasn't the flimsy cot she slept on every night. This was a room as large as her entire studio, with soaring ceilings, black and gray furnishings, and glass walls stretching from floor to ceiling, revealing Manhattan drowning in sunset. Mia tried to sit up. Pain tore through her chest and strangled her cry. Only then did she realize her body had been carefully bandaged. Clean white wraps circling her ribs where cheap gauze once was. An intravenous line pierced her left arm. A heart monitor pulsed steadily beside her. She was wearing a black men's shirt, far too big, carrying the scent of an expensive cologne she had never known. Who had changed her clothes? Where was she? What had happened after she collapsed? The door opened. A man around 60 stepped in. Silver hair, gold-rimmed glasses, a black leather briefcase in hand. He offered a mild smile when he saw her awake. "Miss Bennett, you're awake. That's good." I'm Dr. Thomas Reed. Who are you? Where am I? Mia tried to retreat, her back striking the headboard, pain draining the color from her face. Dr. Reed raised both hands as if calming a wild animal. Stay calm. You're safe. This is Mr. Valenti's penthouse. You were unconscious for nearly 10 hours. Valenti. The name rang through Mia's mind like an alarm bell. Matteo Valenti, Chief Executive Officer, billionaire, the venomous serpent of New York. She remembered the final moments before darkness took her. Tattooed hands catching her, the scent of a man's cologne, a low voice issuing orders. Then blackness swallowed everything. I need to leave. Mia reached for the intravenous line. You can't, Dr. Reed said, still calm but edged with firmness. You have 3 broken ribs, a punctured left lung, internal trauma, severe blood loss, and prolonged malnutrition. A few more hours without emergency care and you wouldn't have survived. Mia froze. She knew she was in bad shape. She hadn't known it was that bad. Who did this to you? Dr. Reed asked, his eyes fixed on hers. No one. It was an accident. Silence followed. The doctor said nothing, only watched her with the gaze of a man who had seen too many lies in his lifetime. Then he nodded, jotted something in his notebook, and stepped out. Get some rest. He'll come see you now. Mia didn't have time to ask who he was before the door opened again, and the man who entered made her forget how to breathe. Matteo Valenti looked like no man she had ever seen. Over 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, muscle concealed beneath a flawlessly tailored black suit, dark hair slicked back with precision, a face carved from stone, sharp and cold beyond reason, but the most terrifying thing was his eyes. Steel gray, like a storm poised to break, like a blade waiting to cut flesh. Those eyes locked onto Mia, and she felt stripped to the bone. He stopped beside the bed. He didn't sit. He simply stood there, immense and frightening, like a god passing judgment. Mia Bennett. His voice was low and unhurried, each word falling like ice into still water. 26 years old, senior data analyst, employed at Valenti Corporation for 2 years and 3 months. Lives alone in Queens. Has a 19-year-old sister named Rose, currently hospitalized awaiting heart surgery. Owes $270,000 in medical bills. Works nights at a Brooklyn bar to pay the debt. And 3 days ago, someone beat you nearly to death in my company garage. Mia couldn't breathe. Not because of her broken ribs, but because this man knew everything. Every last detail of her ruined life. What do you want? She asked, her voice shaking though she forced it steady. Matteo Valenti tilted his head, studying her as if she were an intriguing puzzle. The real question, he said slowly, is who dared to touch something inside my building, and why you're protecting them. Matteo Valenti didn't ask another question. He only looked at Mia one last time with eyes cold and gray like steel, then walked out of the room, the door closing without a sound. But his silence was more terrifying than any threat, because Matteo Valenti didn't need anyone to tell him the truth. He had his own ways. 20 minutes later, he sat in his private office on the 52nd floor, Tony Russo standing across from him. Tony was Matteo's closest bodyguard, 42 years old, a former Special Forces soldier, absolutely loyal, and skilled at making people reveal everything they wanted to hide. I need everything, Matteo said, his voice empty of emotion. The garage cameras from 3 days ago, her email history, any human resources reports, and investigate Derek Harrison, everything about him. Tony nodded and vanished. Matteo turned his chair toward Manhattan, sinking into the night. He had been watching Mia Bennett for 8 months. At first, it was only curiosity. She was different. In a company full of sycophants and greed, Mia worked as if her life depended on it. She didn't play office politics, didn't fake smiles for superiors, didn't try to climb by pushing others down. She just worked, excelled, then disappeared. Matteo had seen her many times through security cameras, working until 10 at night, eating lunch alone with a cheap sandwich, walking 15 minutes to the subway instead of calling a cab. Every small detail told him the same story. This girl was fighting something far bigger than what people could see, and today, when she collapsed into his arms, Matteo finally understood what she was fighting. The brutality of men who believed they stood above the law. His phone vibrated. Tony sent the first file. Garage camera footage, 11:17 at night, 3 days earlier. Matteo played the video. And for the next 14 minutes, he watched hell. Derek Harrison emerged from behind a concrete pillar. Mia tried to run. He grabbed her hair and yanked her back. She used pepper spray. He knocked it aside and punched her square in the face. Then he beat her, punched, kicked, stomped, smashed her head into the wall. 14 minutes of torturing a defenseless woman. 14 minutes in which Mia tried to get up, tried to fight back, tried to survive. And 14 minutes in which Derek Harrison laughed like a monster savoring his feast. When the video ended, Mateo's eyes had shifted from gray to pure black. That was the color those who knew him called the color of death. The last time anyone had seen that color. 5 men vanished from the earth and were never found. The second file arrived, a human resources report. Mia had filed a complaint about Derek Harrison's sexual harassment 7 days earlier. Margaret Shaw, head of human resources, had written beneath it, insufficient evidence. Recommendation that the employee exercise caution when making accusations against senior management. Mateo clenched his teeth. The third file. Derek Harrison's email history over the past 6 months. 37 emails sent to Mia Bennett. Suggestions. Threats. Promises of promotion if she agreed to dinner. Warnings of consequences if she refused. And the final email, sent 2 days after the assault. Hope you learned your lesson, Mia. Next time, don't think you can refuse someone above you. The fourth file. Derek Harrison's personnel record. 8 years at Valenti Corporation. Not a single disciplinary action. But Tony had dug deeper. 4 female employees had resigned over the past 3 years, all of them having worked under Derek. 2 had left the city. 1 refused to speak, and 1, only 23 years old, had jumped from a building 6 months after quitting. No one investigated. No one asked questions. Because Derek Harrison's uncle was Richard Harrison, a member of the board. The final file. Hallway camera footage from the 32nd floor, 1 hour before today's meeting. Derek Harrison walked past Mia's desk. He stopped, leaned down, whispered something into her ear. Mia flinched as if acid had been thrown on her. Derek smiled and walked away. Mateo shut off the screen. He sat in the dark for 15 minutes, unmoving, silent. Then he picked up the phone. Sal. His voice was as calm as if he were ordering morning coffee. Bring Derek Harrison to warehouse number 3. Does the boss want him alive or dead? Silence stretched for 3 seconds. Alive, Mateo said slowly, each word dripping like venom from a serpent's fangs. I want him alive long enough to understand what regret feels like. Mia waited until 2 in the morning. The penthouse lay submerged in silence. City lights slipped through the glass, casting hazy streaks across the floor. She had remained still for hours, pretending to sleep whenever the nurse came in to check on her, planning every detail in her mind. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't owe Matteo Valenti anything. She had heard enough stories about this man. Those who owed him never truly escaped. They became puppets, pulled by invisible strings until they no longer had any use. And Mia Bennett had already lost too much in her life to lose the last thing she still had, her freedom. She slowly sat up, biting her lip to keep from crying out in pain. She pulled the intravenous needle from her arm, a few drops of blood seeping out. She wiped them away with the corner of the sheet and lowered her feet to the floor. Cold. The marble floor was ice cold beneath her bare feet. Mia had no shoes, no phone, no money. She had only the black shirt of the man she was trying to run from. But she didn't care. She had survived worse than walking barefoot through the New York night. She opened the bedroom door. The hallway was dark and endless. Mia walked, one hand against the wall to steady herself, each step an act of torture. Her broken ribs ground together. Her lungs wheezed whenever she tried to draw a deep breath. But she kept going. For Rose. For her sister lying alone in a hospital bed, surely afraid, surely wondering why her sister hadn't come. Mia found the elevator at the end of the hall. She pressed the button. No light. She pressed it again. Still nothing. The elevator was locked. Her heart sank. She turned to the emergency stairwell. The steel door was heavy. She pushed with her whole body, pain tearing through her chest, but she didn't stop. The door opened, and Mia froze. Matteo Valenti was sitting on the first step, his back against the wall, a glass of whiskey in his hand, as if he had known she would come here, as if he had been waiting all night. 2:17, he said, without checking a watch. You tolerate pain better than I expected. Mia stepped back. I need to leave. No, that isn't a question, Mr. Valenti. That's a fact. I need to get out of here right now. Matteo stood, slowly, every movement radiating perfectly controlled danger. He was nearly a foot taller than her, and in the narrow stairwell his presence was overwhelming. Where exactly are you going, Mia? Home. The apartment your landlord threw you out of 3 days ago? Mia stiffened. Or to Mount Sinai Hospital, where your sister is in room 72 on the 3rd floor, waiting for a heart valve replacement surgery you can't afford. Stop. Mia's voice shook. You don't have the right to investigate my life. I have every right when someone is attacked in my building. And I know more than you think. Mateo stepped closer. Mia backed up until her spine met the cold wall. I know you've worked 2 jobs every day for 14 months. I know you eat 1 meal a day to save money for your sister. I know you sold your mother's old car last month to pay part of the hospital bills. And I know you had exactly $37 left in your bank account as of yesterday morning. Mia couldn't speak. She wanted to scream at him, to punch that cold, handsome face, to cry from helplessness and humiliation. But she did none of it. She just stood there, trembling, struggling not to fall apart for the 2nd time in 1 day. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice torn from her throat. What do you want me to do in exchange for this help? Become your mistress? Your puppet? Mateo tilted his head, something like anger flashing in his eyes. Is that the kind of man you think I am? I don't know what kind of man you are. I only know nothing comes for free. He was silent for a long moment, studying her as if weighing something crucial. Then he spoke, his voice lower and slower than before. You're right, nothing is free. But the price I'm asking isn't what you think. Then what is it? Mateo lifted his hand, lightly touching Mia's chin, raising her face so she had to meet his eyes. You stay here until you heal. You tell me who did this to you and why you protected him, and you stop destroying yourself as if your life isn't worth a damn. Mia wanted to argue, to say she didn't need anyone's pity, to hold on to the walls she had built over so many years. But when she looked into those gray eyes, she didn't see pity. She saw something else, something far more dangerous. Genuine concern, and that frightened her more than any threat ever could. The next morning, Mateo kept his word. A sleek black Mercedes waited outside the building, Tony Russo standing by the open door. Mia stepped out of the elevator wearing clothes someone had prepared for her, fitting with unsettling precision, as if the buyer knew her exact measurements. She didn't ask. She didn't want to know what else Matteo Valenti knew about her. He didn't come with her. Only Tony drove in silence through the morning streets of Manhattan. Mia sat in the back seat, watching the city slide past the glass without truly seeing it. Her mind held only one thought. Rose. Her sister hadn't seen her in 4 days. 4 days felt like an eternity for a 19-year-old fighting alone with a heart on the verge of failing. The car stopped in front of Mount Sinai Hospital. Tony opened the door for her. You have 1 hour. I'll wait here. Mia nodded, not bothering to argue about being watched. She didn't have the strength for pointless battles. She only wanted to see her sister. The hospital corridor stretched long and white, the familiar sting of disinfectant painfully intimate. Mia had walked these halls hundreds of times over the past 2 years, since Rose's congenital heart condition had worsened. Every visit, she wondered if it would be the last. Room 72. She stopped at the door, drew a deep breath despite the protest of broken ribs, then pushed it open. Rose lay in the bed, small and pale amid wires and machines. Brown hair spilled over the white pillow, blue eyes just like Mia's but drained of life. When she saw her sister, those eyes lit up, then instantly filled with tears. Mia. Rose's voice was weak but edged with reproach. 4 days. You disappeared for 4 days without a word. I thought you were dead. Mia went to the bedside, sat beside her, struggling to keep her face calm. I'm sorry. Work got busy. She lied. Rose grabbed her hand, squeezing so hard Mia was startled by the strength left in that fragile body. You always lie to me. You say everything's fine, but I watch you get thinner every week. You say you're not tired, but your eyes are ringed with black like a ghost. And now you come here wearing all that makeup like you're hiding something. Mia fell silent. She had underestimated her sister. Rose might be sick, but she wasn't stupid. Let me see. Rose lifted her hand, touching her sister's cheek. Mia flinched on instinct, but it was too late. Rose's finger wiped away the concealer, revealing the dark bruise beneath. The young girl's eyes widened in horror. Mia, who did this to you? No one. I fell. Don't lie to me anymore. Tears spilled down Rose's face. I'm not a child. I know you're carrying everything alone. I know you work 2 jobs. I know you skip meals to pay my hospital bills. And I know you're slowly killing yourself because of me. Rose, don't say that. Then what is it? The truth. Rose sobbed, her body shaking until the heart monitor stuttered in alarm. I'm a burden. If it weren't for me, you'd have a normal life. You wouldn't have to endure all this. You wouldn't get beaten because I know this has something to do with me, with money, with you having to keep your job at any cost." Mia pulled her sister into her arms, ignoring the pain ripping through her chest. She held her as if Rose would vanish if she let go. "Listen to me." Mia's voice trembled but stayed firm. "You're not a burden. You're the reason I'm still alive. When Mom died, I wanted to die too. I had no reason to wake up every morning. But then I looked at you, 17, alone in a hospital room, and I knew I wasn't allowed to fall apart. You're everything I have left in this world, Rose, and I'd do anything to keep you alive. Anything. But you can't keep sacrificing like this," Rose cried into her shoulder. "One day you'll die because of me, and I can't live with that." "I won't die," Mia said, though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. "I promise I won't die, and I promise your surgery will happen. How? Where will the money come from?" Mia thought of Matteo Valenti, of the lavish penthouse, of his vague offer, of the price she might have to pay. "I'll find a way," she said, and this time she wasn't lying. The sisters sat in silence, holding each other in the stark white hospital room. The heart monitor pulsed steadily, a reminder that time was running out, and Mia knew she had no other choice. She would stay with Matteo Valenti, not because she wanted to, but because it was the only way to save Rose. When Mia returned to the penthouse, Matteo was waiting for her in the living room. He sat in a black leather chair, a glass of whiskey in his hand, but he didn't drink. He only watched her enter with gray eyes that gave nothing away. "How's your sister?" he asked. Mia stopped in the middle of the room, surprised by the question. She had prepared herself for many things, but not concern. "Rose is fine," she answered shortly. "As fine as someone who's about to die without money for surgery can be." Matteo set the glass on the table and stood. "The surgery will be done next week." Mia blinked. "What?" "I spoke to the attending physician while you were with your sister. All expenses have been paid. Rose will be operated on by the best cardiac surgeon on the East Coast." "No." Mia shook her head and stepped back. "I told you I don't need charity, and I told you this isn't charity." Matteo moved closer, his voice as calm as if he were talking about the weather. "This is justice." Mia didn't understand. Justice for what? Matteo was silent for a moment, as if weighing how much to say. Then he took his phone from his pocket, opened a video, and handed it to her. "You should watch this." Mia took the phone with trembling hands. The screen lit up and she saw hell. A dark room with stained concrete walls. Derek Harrison was tied to a chair, his face swollen, blood running from his nose and mouth. 3 large men stood around him. One of them she recognized as Sal, whom she had glimpsed at the penthouse. In the video, Sal held a pair of pliers and said something to Derek. Derek screamed and begged. Then a shriek tore through the air as Sal used the pliers to snap each of his fingers. 1, 2, 3. Mia dropped the phone as if it burned her. She wanted to vomit, to scream, to run from this room, from the man standing in front of her with a calm that was terrifying. "What did you do?" she whispered. "What had to be done?" Matteo picked up the phone and turned off the video. He'll never beat another woman again. Not because he's sorry, but because he no longer has hands to do it. Mia felt her legs give way. She backed up until she hit the wall, then slowly slid down to the floor. Matteo didn't come closer. He just stood there, looking at her without a trace of regret. "You're a monster," Mia whispered. "Yes," he replied, not denying it. "I'm a monster. I've done far worse things many times in my life, and I'll do them again if necessary. But Derek Harrison deserved what he got. Not only for what he did to you, but for everyone else." Mia looked up, her eyes red. "Everyone else?" Matteo sat down across from her, keeping just enough distance so she didn't feel threatened. 4 women resigned over the past 3 years after working under him. 2 left the city without a trace. 1 refuses to talk about the past. And 1, 23 years old, jumped from the 12th floor of her apartment 6 months after she quit. Mia caught her breath. She killed herself because of him? No one investigated. No one asked questions. Because Derek's uncle sat on the board. Because human resources was paid to look the other way. Because in this world, those with power are allowed to do whatever they want. Silence stretched on. Mia didn't know what she was supposed to feel. Horror at the violence. Relief at the justice. Guilt because part of her felt satisfied knowing Derek Harrison would never hurt anyone again. "Who do you think you are?" she finally asked. "God?" "No," Matteo replied, his voice low and dark. "God forgives. I don't." He stood, looking down at her with an expression Mia couldn't decipher. "The money for your sister's surgery isn't a debt. It's compensation Derek Harrison owed you, taken from his personal account before he lost the ability to sign checks. You don't owe me anything, Mia. The only person who owed you has already paid in full." He walked toward the door, paused for a second. "Get some rest. Dr. Reed will come to check on you in the morning." Then he disappeared through the door, leaving Mia alone with the chaos in her chest and a question without an answer. How could she be afraid of a man while at the same time feeling safer than she ever had simply by being near him? The first week in Matteo Valenti's penthouse was an undeclared Cold War. Mia built an invisible wall between herself and the man who had saved her. A wall made of silence, distance, and the refusal of any help that wasn't absolutely necessary. She stayed in her room most of the time, only coming out to eat, or when Dr. Reed arrived to examine her. She didn't speak unless spoken to directly, and even then her answers were brutally brief. "Yes, no, I'm fine, thank you." Matteo left her alone. He didn't force conversation, didn't invade her space, didn't demand anything from her. He only appeared at dinner, sitting at the head of the long dining table, eating in silence while Mia sat at the far end, separated from him by what felt like a chasm. She hated his calm. She hated the way he looked at her, as if he were reading every thought in her mind. She hated that he never lost his composure, no matter how cold she was. But what she hated most was that she couldn't hate him completely. Every morning she woke to find breakfast prepared on the small table in her room. Not extravagant food. Oatmeal with honey, made exactly the way her mother used to make it. Toast with peanut butter, something she had once mentioned in passing to a coworker months ago. How did he know? She wondered every day but never asked aloud. On the third day, she discovered the closet had been filled. Not glamorous dresses or expensive designer clothes, but simple, comfortable things in the style she always wore. Soft sweaters, well-fitting jeans, white sneakers. There were even books, neatly arranged on the shelf by the window. The same books she had borrowed from the public library, the ones she never had enough money to buy. Mia stood in front of the shelf, her hands trembling as she touched each spine. Someone had investigated her life down to this level of detail. Someone knew what she liked to read, to eat, to wear, and instead of feeling violated, she felt seen. For the first time in her life, someone truly saw her. That terrified her to the bone. She wasn't used to being cared for. She was used to fighting alone, carrying everything alone, falling alone and forcing herself to stand back up. Matteo Valenti's kindness was like water poured onto a desert, and Mia didn't know what to do with it except build her walls higher. On the 5th day, she couldn't take it anymore. She walked into the living room at 10 at night, where Matteo was sitting by the fireplace reading documents. He looked up when he heard her footsteps, said nothing, simply waited. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked, her voice harder than she meant it to be. "Doing what? The food, the clothes, the books. Are you trying to buy me?" Matteo set the papers aside and looked at her with gray eyes that didn't ripple. "Do you think someone being kind to you must have an agenda?" "I think no one is kind without a reason, especially people like you." "People like me," he repeated, not angry, only curious. "What do you know about people like me? I know you're a mafia boss. I know you kill people. I know you tortured Derek Harrison until he wasn't human anymore. And you're afraid I'll do the same to you." "No," Mia said, and she surprised herself by realizing it was true. "I'm afraid I'll start trusting you, and then you'll betray me like everyone else." Silence stretched between them. Matteo stood and walked closer, stopping at a distance that felt deliberate. "Who betrayed you, Mia?" "Your father promised he'd always protect the family, then died in a workplace accident without a single dollar of compensation. Your mother promised she'd never leave you, then died of cancer when you were only 22. Your ex-boyfriend promised to love you, then beat you for 3 years before you found the courage to escape. And Derek Harrison promised to help your career, then nearly killed you in a dark garage. So you ask why I don't trust anyone. Because every time I do, all I get back is pain." Mia didn't realize she was crying until a tear fell onto her hand. She turned away, ashamed of her weakness, but Matteo's voice stopped her. "I'm not your father, your mother, or any of the bastards who hurt you. I don't make promises. I only tell the truth. You're safe here, and I don't demand anything from you. Whether you believe that is your choice." He returned to his chair and continued reading as if the conversation had never happened, and Mia stood there in the vast room, realizing that the wall she had built might not be as solid as she'd believed. On the 8th day, Mia received a call from the hospital. It wasn't bad news about Rose. It was something that shocked her even more. "Miss Bennett, I'm calling to confirm that all previous hospital debts for your family have been fully paid." The voice of the finance officer came through the phone, professional and indifferent, as if reading a routine report. Mia stood frozen in the middle of the room. "All debts?" "Which debts do you mean?" "All of them," the employee replied. "The cancer treatment expenses for Mrs. Patricia Bennett, $243,000. The long-term care costs for Miss Rose Bennett over the past 2 years, $117,000. And the full cost of the upcoming heart surgery, along with a 6-month post-operative care package. A total of nearly $500,000 was paid yesterday morning, via transfer from a company called Valenti Holdings." Mia didn't remember how she ended the call. She only knew that when she came back to herself, she was standing outside Mateo's office on the top floor of the penthouse. Her fist clenched white, her whole body trembling with anger. She pushed the door open without knocking. Mateo was sitting behind his desk, phone to his ear, speaking Italian to someone. When he saw her, he said a quick sentence and hung up, gray eyes settling on her without the slightest surprise, as if he had been waiting for this moment. $500,000. Mia's voice shook with fury. "You paid $500,000 without saying a word to me." Mateo leaned back in his chair, calm enough to make her want to scream at him. "Are you angry that I erased your family's debt? I'm angry because you think you have the right to control my life. You said the surgery money came from Derek's account. You said nothing about the rest, about my mother's debt, about 2 years of Rose's hospital bills, about everything else, because you would have refused. Of course I would have refused." Mia stepped closer to the desk, both hands slamming onto the wood. "You don't have the right to do this. You don't have the right to erase my debts like it's a game. You don't have the right to make me owe you an amount of money I could never repay in my lifetime." Mateo stood, and despite her anger, Mia still had to step back under the weight of his towering presence. "You don't owe me anything. I don't want you to repay me." "Then what do you want?" Mia shouted. "No one gives $500,000 away. No one is that kind without a reason. What do you want from me? You want me to be your mistress? Your slave? You want me to sell my soul to the devil in exchange for checks?" Mateo's eyes darkened, and for the first time since Mia had met him, she saw something like hurt flicker in his gaze, though it vanished so quickly she wasn't sure it had been real. "Do you think that poorly of me?" he asked, his voice low and cold. "I don't know what to think of you," Mia replied, her voice still trembling but no longer shouting. "I only know that my whole life, every time someone helped me, they demanded a price far greater than what they gave. And you've given me so much that I'm terrified to imagine what you'll ask in return." Silence stretched between them, heavy and charged like the air before a storm. Then Mateo exhaled, a rare sound of weariness from a man who always seemed unbreakable. 20 years ago, he said, his voice so low Mia had to lean closer to hear it. "My father was sick, liver cancer. He needed surgery urgently, but we had no money. My family had nothing back then, just poor immigrants trying to survive in this city. My mother knelt and begged people for help. She sold everything we owned, and it still wasn't enough." He looked straight into Mia's eyes. "My father died because we didn't have $50,000. $50,000 that for the rich is a single lavish party, but for us was the difference between life and death. I swore at my father's grave that if one day I had the means, I'd never let anyone suffer that pain again." Mia couldn't speak. She stood there, between anger that was dissolving and something new beginning to form, something like understanding. $500,000 to me is what I earn in 2 weeks, Mateo continued. But to you, it's a lifetime of weight lifted. What do you think I'd demand from you in exchange for something I have in excess? He stepped closer, close enough for Mia to catch the scent of his cologne, close enough to see the veins standing out on his hands. "I don't want your body. I don't want your soul. I don't want you to do anything to repay me. I just want you to stop killing yourself a little more each day over debts that were never your fault." Mia felt tears spill over, and this time she didn't stop them. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care about me this much?" Mateo didn't answer. He only looked at her with those deep gray eyes, and in that moment, Mia saw something she had never seen in anyone's gaze directed at her before. Respect, pure and without demand, and it shattered her walls more effectively than any words ever could. The day of the surgery arrived faster than Mia had expected. That morning, she woke at 4, unable to sleep no matter how hard she tried. She sat on the bed in the dark, staring out at Manhattan slowly brightening beyond the window, praying to whatever God might be listening. "Please let my sister live. Please don't take away the last person I have left in this world. Matteo had arranged everything. The best surgeon, the finest operating room, the most elite medical team. He had even secured an entire private floor of the hospital to ensure security and privacy. When Mia asked why it had to be done on that scale, he answered simply, "Because your sister deserves to be treated like a princess on the most important day of her life." Mia didn't know how to respond. At 6 a.m, she arrived at the hospital. Rose had been prepared and lay on the bed in a pale blue hospital gown, her face drawn but trying to smile when she saw her sister. "I'm scared," Rose whispered as Mia took her hand. "I know," Mia replied, forcing her voice steady though her heart was breaking apart. "But everything's going to be okay. You'll go to sleep, and when you wake up, you'll have a strong new heart. You promise?" "I promise," Mia said, even though she knew it was a promise she had no right to make. Some things were beyond human control, but she would say anything to ease the fear in her sister's eyes. The nurse came to wheel Rose into the operating room. Mia followed until the doors closed in front of her, and she could only watch her sister disappear behind the frosted glass. Then she waited. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours. 6 hours passed like 6 years. Mia sat in the waiting room, not eating, not drinking, not moving. She stared at the operating room doors as if looking away for even a second would invite disaster. She didn't realize Matteo was there until he placed a glass of water in front of her. "You need to drink something." His voice was low and unusually gentle. Mia shook her head without speaking. She didn't trust herself to open her mouth without breaking down. Matteo didn't push. He simply sat in the chair beside her, silent, present. No questions, no hollow comfort, just there, like a solid rock in the storm she was enduring. The ticking of the clock echoed in her mind like a countdown to the end of the world. Every minute that passed was a minute Rose might not survive. Every second of silence filled her head with the worst possible endings. Rose not waking up. Rose dying on the operating table. Rose leaving her alone like their father, like their mother, like everyone she had ever loved. At the 7th hour, the operating room doors opened. The surgeon stepped out, still in green scrubs, mask pulled down to his chin. Mia sprang to her feet, her heart stopping for a single endless beat. The surgery was a success, the doctor said, and Mia heard the smile in his voice. "The new valve is working perfectly. Rose will need time to recover, but she'll be healthy. She'll have a normal life." Mia didn't remember how she reacted. She only knew her knees gave out, and if Matteo hadn't caught her, she would have collapsed onto the hospital floor. Everything she had held inside for so many years shattered at once. She cried, not the quiet tears she was used to, but the raw, tearing sobs of someone who had carried too much for far too long and was finally allowed to let go. She cried from relief. Because Rose would live. Because she no longer had to fear losing her. She cried from pain. From all the sleepless nights, the skipped meals, the moments she thought she would fall and yet forced herself to keep going. She cried from guilt, because she had cursed fate, because she had wanted to give up, because she had wished she didn't have to carry everything alone. And she cried from gratitude, for the man holding her, the man who had come out of nowhere and changed everything. Matteo said nothing. He just held her, one arm supporting her back, the other resting on her head, letting her cry into his chest as if the world were ending. He didn't tell her to stop. He didn't offer empty reassurances that everything would be fine. He simply stayed there, steady and patient, until the storm inside her slowly faded. When Mia finally lifted her head, eyes swollen and red, her face wet with tears, she looked into Matteo's gray eyes and saw something she didn't dare name. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice raw. "Thank you for being here." Matteo lifted his hand and gently wiped the tears from her cheek with his thumb. "There's nowhere else I'd rather be," he said, and for the first time, Mia believed he meant it. After the surgery, everything between Mia and Matteo began to change in ways so small she didn't notice until she looked back. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic breakthrough moments, just tiny cracks appearing in the wall of ice she had built, one by one, until light began to slip through. On the first day of the second week, Mia no longer ate alone in her room. She came to the dining table at dinner time, sat across from Matteo, and they ate together in silence. But it was a different silence, no longer tense or cold. It was the quiet comfort of two people who didn't need words to fill the space. On the second day, Mia found Matteo reading in the living room at 10 at night. She meant to turn back to her room, but instead she sat on the sofa across from him, picked up her own book, and they read together until midnight without exchanging a word. When Mia stood to go to bed, she wished him good night, and Matteo answered with a slight nod and eyes warmer than she had ever seen. On the third day, Mia cooked. She went into the kitchen at 6 in the evening, found ingredients in the refrigerator that the staff restocked daily, and made a simple pasta using the recipe her mother had taught her. When Matteo returned to the penthouse, he stopped in the kitchen doorway, watching her stir the tomato sauce with undisguised surprise. "You don't have to do this," he said. "I know," Mia replied without turning around, "but I want to." They ate Mia's pasta that night, and Matteo said it was the best meal he'd had in years. Mia didn't believe him, but she felt the corner of her mouth lift for the first time in a long while. On the fourth day, Mia visited Rose and told her about the man who was letting her stay. She didn't say who he was. She didn't mention the mafia, or violence, or anything dark. She only said that there was someone who had helped her a great deal. Rose looked at her with eyes bright with curiosity and teasing. "You like him, don't you?" Mia denied it immediately, but her cheeks burned and Rose laughed, the clearest, most carefree laughter Mia had heard from her in 2 years. On the 5th day, Matteo worked late. Mia couldn't sleep, so she sat in the living room, telling herself she was just reading and not waiting for anyone. But when the elevator doors opened at 1 in the morning and Matteo stepped out, exhausted and worn, she already had ginger tea prepared on the table. He looked at her, at the cup, then back at her with an expression Mia couldn't decipher. "You don't need to wait for me," he said. "I know," she replied, "but I want to." The answer mirrored the one she'd given when she cooked, and they both realized it. Matteo said nothing, simply sat and drank the tea, and they stayed together in the late night as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. On the 6th day, Mia laughed. Not a polite or forced smile, but real laughter that burst out when Matteo accidentally spilled coffee on his white shirt and cursed in Italian. He looked at her with mock injury, which only made her laugh harder. And when her laughter finally faded, she saw Matteo watching her with a strange look. "You have a beautiful smile," he said, his voice low and sincere. "You should smile more." Mia didn't know how to respond, so she turned away, her cheeks burning. On the 7th day, Mia realized something that frightened her. She no longer wanted to leave, not because of the luxury penthouse or the comfort of the life it offered, but because of the man there, the man she had sworn never to trust, the man she was slowly falling into the bottomless abyss that carried his name. And the most terrifying part wasn't the fall. It was that she no longer wanted to hold on. That night, Mia found Matteo standing alone on the balcony, gazing out at Manhattan glittering with lights. She meant to turn back, not wanting to disturb him, but something in his posture made her stop. His shoulders were slightly hunched, no longer straight as they always were. His hand gripped the railing so tightly his knuckles were white. And when she stepped closer, she saw he was holding an old photograph, the corners worn and softened as if it had been kept close for many years. "What day is it today?" Mia asked gently, stopping a few steps away. Matteo didn't turn around, but he didn't send her away either. "The anniversary of my father's death," he replied, his voice low and distant. 20 years ago, on this exact day, he died in my arms." Mia moved closer, standing beside him without touching. She looked down at the photo in his hand and saw a middle-aged man with a kind smile, standing next to a boy of about 15 or 16 with the same gray eyes Matteo had now. "He looks kind," she said softly. "He was the best man I ever knew," Matteo replied, and for the first time Mia heard fragility in the voice of the venomous serpent of New York. "He came to America at 20, with $500 in his pocket and a dream of building a new life. He worked 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, washing dishes, carrying boxes, cleaning floors, anything that paid. He met my mother in a small church in Brooklyn, married her when they had nothing but love, and had me a year later." He fell silent for a moment, his eyes fixed on the night. "When I was 7, my father opened a small grocery store in Little Italy. We weren't rich, but we were happy. I remember every night he read to me before bed. He told me, 'Son, no matter how hard life gets, never let it turn you into a bad man.'" Matteo's voice turned bitter as he continued. "He was wrong." "What happened?" Mia asked, even though she feared the answer. Matteo turned to look at her, his gray eyes holding a darkness she had never seen before. "When I was 16, a local gang came to collect protection money from my father's store. He refused. He said he'd rather die than bow to criminals. He drew a deep breath. So they made him die. Mia raised a hand to her mouth, her heart tightening. They came on a Saturday night. 4 men, with guns. My father pushed me into a corner and stood in front of me. He begged them to spare me. He said they could have anything they wanted, just don't touch his son. Silent tears ran down Mateo's face, and Mia realized this might be the first time in many years he had allowed himself to cry. They shot him 7 times in front of me. 7 times. And I could do nothing but watch him fall, blood spreading across the floor, his mouth still whispering my name. Mateo, my son, don't be afraid. Those were the last words he ever said, and I held him until the police arrived, until his blood soaked my clothes, until I swore to myself I'd never let anyone have power over me again. Mia said nothing. She simply reached out and lightly touched his arm, a small gesture carrying all the compassion she could give. After the funeral, my mother collapsed. Mateo continued, his voice flat, as if telling someone else's story. She didn't eat, didn't sleep, just cried and called my father's name. 6 months later, she died of a broken heart. The doctor said it was a heart attack, but I knew the truth. She died because she couldn't live without him. And I, at 17, became an orphan with nothing to my name. He turned back to the city, his voice hardening like steel. I had 2 choices: die like my parents, or become something this world feared. I chose the second. I joined the very gang that killed my father. I learned to fight, learned to shoot, learned how to make people afraid. And when I was strong enough, I killed every man who held a gun that night, one by one, slowly, painfully. He looked at Mia without hiding anything. From then on, I built this empire from blood and bone. I became the venomous serpent everyone fears. I did everything my father told me never to do. And I don't regret it, because in this world, kind men like my father only get to die. Monsters like me are the ones who survive. Mia looked at him, into those gray eyes full of darkness and pain, and she understood. She understood that Matteo Valenti wasn't born a monster. He was made one by this world. And deep inside that terrifying serpent, there was still a 16-year-old boy holding his father's body and crying. 3 a.m, the penthouse was drowned in darkness and silence. Mia couldn't sleep. After the story Matteo told on the balcony, her mind kept spinning with images that didn't belong to her yet haunted her as if she had lived through them herself. A 16-year-old boy holding his father's body, blood soaking into his clothes, gunshots echoing through the night. She understood that pain. She knew what it felt like to lose the people you loved and still be forced to keep living. She turned over once more, then gave up, slipped on a thin robe, and stepped outside. A small light from the kitchen made her stop. Someone had been there before her. Mia walked in and saw Matteo standing by the island, a glass of whiskey in his hand but untouched, his eyes fixed on nothing. He had traded his suit for a simple black t-shirt and trousers, looking softer, closer, less like a mafia boss and more like an ordinary man. "You can't sleep either?" Matteo asked without turning around, as if he already knew she was there. Mia stepped closer, stopping half a step away. "Your story keeps replaying in my head." He finally turned to look at her. "I shouldn't have told you. That's my past. Not a burden you need to carry." "No," Mia shook her head. "I want to know. I want to understand you." "Why?" "Because you understood me," Mia replied, her voice light as breath. "You knew everything about me before I ever said it. You knew my pain, my weight, the nights I cried alone, and you didn't judge. You didn't pity me. You just helped. I think at the very least I owe you the same understanding." Matteo set the whiskey down and turned fully toward her. In the dim kitchen light, his gray eyes looked softer, warmer, no longer cold steel but a sky after rain. "You don't owe me anything, Mia." "I know," she said, "but I want to give it. Not out of obligation. Because I want to." Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of 2 people standing at the edge of something vast, both aware of it, neither daring to step first. Mia broke it. "On the balcony tonight, when you cried," she said slowly, choosing each word with care, "I realized something." "What?" "That you're not a monster. You're just a man who's been hurt too much by the world and chose to protect himself with darkness. And I understand that, because I've done the same." Matteo looked at her, and in his eyes was something Mia had never seen before. Not cold calculation, not perfect control, but vulnerability, longing, the loneliness of someone who had stood at the top too long, without anyone beside him. "Aren't you afraid of me?" he asked, his voice rough. I should be, Mia admitted. You're everything people warn me to stay away from. Dangerous, violent, ruthless. But you're also the man who caught me when I fell. The man who saved my sister. The man who showed me that sometimes darkness isn't meant to be feared, but used as shelter. Mia stepped closer, the space between them now only a few centimeters. She lifted her eyes to his, and in that moment every barrier, every fear, every reason to stop dissolved. What do you want? Matteo asked, his voice low and trembling slightly as if holding something back. Mia didn't answer with words. She rose onto her toes, placed her hand on his chest, felt his heart pounding wildly beneath the thin fabric, and kissed him. Their first kiss wasn't gentle. It carried every emotion they had held back for weeks. The anger of their first meeting, the suspicion and caution, the slow understanding, the deep empathy, and now, the undeniable desire. Matteo returned the kiss with a fierceness that stole Mia's breath. One hand slid behind her neck, the other wrapped around her waist, pulling her close as if afraid she would disappear. He kissed her as if she were his only oxygen and he were drowning. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard, foreheads resting together, eyes closed. You know what this means, don't you? Matteo whispered, his hot breath brushing her lips. If you step into my world, you can't step out. I won't let you go. Mia opened her eyes and met the burning gray of his. Maybe I don't want to be let go. And that was all Matteo needed to hear before he kissed her again. Deeper, more intense, like a declaration that from this moment on she was his, and he would burn anyone who dared to touch her. Happiness in Matteo Valenti's world never lasted long, and Mia would learn that in the most brutal way. 3 days after the kiss in the kitchen, everything between them had changed. There was no more distance, no more wall of ice. They ate breakfast together, talked more, and every night Matteo kissed her before she went to sleep. Nothing more than that, because Matteo said he wanted to wait until she had fully recovered. But those kisses were enough to make Mia feel like she was floating. She had forgotten that in the darkness there were always other serpents watching. Richard Harrison wasn't the kind of man who accepted defeat. When he learned that his nephew Derek Harrison had been turned by Matteo Valenti into a cripple who could no longer use his hands, he swore revenge. Richard was a board member of Valenti Corporation, but he also had other ties, shadowy connections with rival gangs opposed to Matteo. He spent 2 weeks gathering information, tracking every move of the venomous serpent of New York, and discovered his enemy's fatal weakness, a woman named Mia Bennett. Attacking Mia directly would have been suicide while she was inside a heavily guarded penthouse. Richard needed a different target, one easier to reach, and he found Rose. That day was the 5th day after the surgery. Rose had been moved from intensive care to a regular room, her recovery so promising that the doctors said she could be discharged within a week. Mia had visited her that morning, bringing flowers and cake, telling Rose about Matteo without going into details about who he was. Rose teased her until Mia blushed, and the two of them laughed as if all the darkness in their lives had finally passed. Mia left the hospital at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, promising to return that evening. She didn't know it would be the last time she saw her sister's smile for many hours. At 6 o'clock in the evening, Mia's phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. She opened it and the blood in her veins froze. It was a video. Rose was tied to a chair in a dark room, blindfolded, her mouth sealed with tape. The young girl was crying, her whole body trembling, still wearing her hospital gown. A man's voice echoed in the video, cold and venomous. "Hello, Miss Bennett. I'm Richard Harrison. I believe you know that name. My nephew Derek can't call you because he no longer has fingers to dial a number, but I can send his regards for him." The voice gave a short, mocking laugh. "You have 2 hours to come to warehouse number 7 at the Brooklyn docks. Alone. Don't inform Valenti. Don't bring anyone. If I see the shadow of anyone other than you, your sister will die, and I'll send you each part of her body in gift boxes." The video ended. Mia stood frozen in the penthouse living room, the phone nearly slipping from her shaking hand. No, no, no. Rose had just come out of surgery. Her heart hadn't fully recovered yet. Any shock could kill her. Mia looked around. Matteo was in a meeting downstairs and wouldn't be back for at least an hour. She could wait, tell him everything, let him handle it the way he handled Derek. But Richard had been clear. If Matteo appeared, Rose would die. Mia couldn't take that risk. She couldn't gamble her sister's life on anything. With trembling hands, she wrote a short note and left it on Matteo's desk. Then she changed her clothes, called the elevator, and stepped alone into the night. She knew this could be a trap. She knew she might die. But between her life and Rose's life, Mia never had to think. She had promised her mother she would protect her sister, and she would keep that promise, even if it cost her her own life. The Brooklyn docks at night were a world completely different from glamorous Manhattan. No bright lights, no constant rush of traffic, only thick darkness, the sharp sting of salt in the air, and wind howling through rusted containers stacked like giant iron tombs. Mia got out of the taxi 200 meters from warehouse number 7 and told the driver not to wait. She stood alone on the deserted road, her heart pounding as if it might explode inside her chest. Her ribs still weren't fully healed, and every deep breath made her wince with pain. But physical pain was nothing compared to the fear crushing her heart. Rose, her sister, was in the enemy's hands, alone, terrified, and could die if Mia made a single wrong move. Mia drew a deep breath and started walking, one step at a time toward the warehouse. Her sneakers made almost no sound on the cracked concrete. She had turned off her phone before leaving the penthouse, knowing that if Mateo called and she didn't answer, he'd find a way to track her. She didn't want that. She didn't want him showing up and making everything worse. Richard Harrison had been clear. Alone. Or Rose dies. Warehouse number 7 loomed ahead, a massive iron building with broken windows and a rusted metal door. A weak yellow light leaked through the cracks, the only sign that anyone was inside. Mia stopped at the entrance, her hands clenched into fists to keep them from shaking. She had no weapon, no plan, no backup. She had only herself and her love for her sister. She hoped that would be enough. She pushed the door open. Metal shrieked against metal, the sound echoing through the empty space. Inside, the warehouse was vast, with only a few hanging bulbs casting pale circles of light in a sea of darkness. And in the center of the room, Rose sat on a chair, her hands tied behind her back, her eyes blindfolded, her mouth sealed with tape. The young girl was crying, her shoulders shaking, her sobs reduced to muffled, broken sounds by the tape. Mia's heart shattered. "Rose, I'm here. I'm here." She started toward her sister, but slow clapping echoed from the shadows. How touching. Richard Harrison's voice rang out, dripping with mockery and venom. "Sisterly love is truly beautiful." He stepped out from behind a steel pillar, dressed in a gray 3-piece suit as if attending a gala rather than orchestrating a kidnapping. 5 large men followed him, all armed. Mia counted them quickly and understood she had no chance of fighting. "I'm here," she said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Let my sister go." Richard laughed, a cold sound bouncing off the warehouse walls. "Let her go. After everything your lover did to my nephew. Derek will never be able to hold a pen again, Miss Bennett." His hands were crushed into pulp. "And you think I'd let you walk away so easily? I had nothing to do with that. Derek attacked me. He deserved what he got. Maybe." Richard shrugged. "But an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Valenti took my nephew's hands. I'll take his heart. And you, beautiful Miss Bennett, are that heart." Mia felt the blood freeze in her veins. He wasn't planning to release Rose. He was planning to kill them both. This wasn't an exchange. It was a trap. "What do you want?" she asked, trying to buy time even though she didn't know why. "I want Matteo Valenti to suffer," Richard replied, his eyes blazing with madness. "I want him to know what it feels like to lose the one thing that matters most. I want him on his knees, begging like a dog. And when he comes here to save you, I'll kill you in front of him, then kill your sister, then kill him." He's insane, Mia thought. Richard Harrison had lost his mind to hatred. "He doesn't know I'm here," Mia said. "I didn't tell him. He won't come." Richard looked at her with feigned pity. "Oh, you're so naive. You think the venomous serpent of New York doesn't watch you 24 hours a day. You think he let you leave without knowing where you were going." He glanced at his watch. "I'd say he'll be here in about 15 minutes. And that's when the real party begins." Mia looked at Rose, at her sister trembling in terror, and she knew she had to do something. Anything. She couldn't stand here and wait to die. She had survived Derek's beating. She had survived years of hell with her ex-boyfriend. She had survived the deaths of her parents and the crushing weight of debt. She wouldn't die here, and she wouldn't let Rose die, even if she had to pay with her own life. 12 minutes later, hell broke loose. There was no warning, no shouted command, only darkness suddenly coming alive as every light in the warehouse went out at once. Richard Harrison swore and barked orders for his men to turn on their flashlights. But before anyone could react, the first gunshot rang out. One of Richard's 5 gunmen went down, His knee shattered, his scream tearing through the night. Then a second shot. A third. Within 10 seconds, 3 men were on the ground, writhing in pain but still alive. Whoever was shooting wasn't aiming to kill. They were aiming to cripple. Someone wanted them alive long enough to suffer what was coming next. Mia used the chaos and rushed to Rose, throwing her body over her sister to shield her. She ripped the tape from Rose's mouth and tore at the ropes, binding her wrists while gunfire echoed and screams filled the space around them. Sister, what's happening? Rose sobbed, her eyes still blindfolded, her hands clutching Mia's clothes as if afraid her sister would vanish. It's okay. Everything's going to be okay, Mia whispered, even though she wasn't sure it was true. Stay low. Don't move. The light snapped back on, and Mia froze at the sight in front of her. Matteo Valenti stood in the center of the warehouse, his black suit perfectly pressed, his gun still smoking in his hand. Around him were Tony, Sal, and at least 20 other men, all armed to the teeth, closing in on what remained of Richard Harrison's crew. 4 of Richard's 5 gunmen were down, moaning on the floor with shattered limbs. Only one remained standing beside him, shaking, his gun pointed at nothing in particular, and Richard Harrison, who had been laughing in Mia's face minutes earlier, now looked deathly pale. "Valenti," he croaked, all arrogance drained from his voice. "How did you get here so fast?" Matteo didn't answer. He just walked forward, slowly, each step echoing with menace in the sudden silence. His gray eyes were no longer steel. They were pitch black, the color of death, the color everyone who knew him understood was an omen. "Did you really think I let her leave without knowing where she was?" Matteo finally said, his voice low and deliberate, venom dripping from every word. "Did you think anything happens in this city without me knowing? I knew she left the penthouse before she stepped into the elevator. I knew she came here before she got out of the taxi. And I knew you grabbed her sister the moment you planted your men in that hospital." He stopped 3 steps from Richard, his gun aimed straight at the man's head. "Your mistake was thinking I'd wait, that I'd panic, that I'd come running in here alone like some idiot in a movie. I'm not a lovesick fool, Harrison. I'm Matteo Valenti, and when someone touches what's mine, I don't rescue, I erase." Richard trembled, raising his hands as he tried to back away, only to hit the wall behind him. "We can negotiate. I have money, power. I can give you anything you want." Matteo tilted his head as if considering the offer. Then he fired. The bullet tore through Richard's thigh. He screamed and collapsed, blood spraying across the concrete. "I want you to suffer," Matteo said, stepping over the writhing man. "And I already have what I want." He turned to Mia and Rose, his eyes fading back from black to gray the instant he saw they were safe. Then he nodded to Tony, signaling him to get them out. Tony helped Rose to her feet, the young woman still shaking and crying, clinging to Mia as if letting go would kill her. Mia followed, but she glanced back one last time. Matteo stood there in the blood-soaked warehouse, surrounded by groaning enemies and loyal soldiers, looking like a god of war risen straight out of hell. And in that moment, Mia realized she wasn't afraid of him. She never truly had been. She was afraid of losing him. "Will he be okay?" Rose whispered as they stepped outside where more black vehicles were already waiting. Mia looked back at the warehouse, heard the screams echoing from inside, and knew Richard Harrison wouldn't die that night, but he would wish he had. "He'll be fine," Mia said. And for the first time, she believed it completely. "He's Matteo Valenti. He's always fine." Matteo returned to the penthouse at 4 a.m. Mia was sitting on the living room sofa, waiting, unable to sleep even though Tony had urged her to rest after the night from hell. Rose had been taken to another secure apartment with doctors and a security team on duty 24 hours a day, and the young woman had finally fallen asleep after a mild sedative. But Mia couldn't sleep, not because she was afraid, because she needed to see him, needed to know he was safe, needed to say the things she had held inside all night. The elevator doors opened and she jumped to her feet. Matteo stepped in, the suit gone, only a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, streaks of dried blood on his wrists and forearms. He stopped when he saw her, his gray eyes reading her in a second, before his expression softened. "You should be sleeping," he said, tired but gentle. "I couldn't sleep without knowing you were okay," Mia replied, stepping closer. "Are you hurt?" "No." Matteo shook his head. "This blood isn't mine." Silence settled between them. They stood facing each other in the vast living room, the dim light carving shadows across the space. Mia had so much to say but didn't know where to start. Finally, she spoke the first thing that came to mind. I'm sorry. Matteo frowned. Sorry for what? For leaving without telling you. For thinking I could handle it alone. For not trusting you. Tears burned her eyes, but she held them back. I know you're angry. I know I was reckless. But Rose is my sister. I couldn't risk her life. Matteo was quiet for a long moment. Long enough for Mia to think he really was too angry to speak. Then he sighed and rubbed his forehead. Do you know what made me angriest? His voice was low and tight. Not that you left. Not that you didn't tell me. It was the letter you left behind. Mia blinked. What did I write? You wrote that if anything happened to you, you wanted me to take care of Rose. You wrote that you regretted nothing. You wrote that these past weeks were the happiest of your life. Matteo stepped closer, his gray eyes burning with something between fury and pain. You wrote it like you had already accepted you were going to die, like your life didn't matter, like you were just a sacrifice to buy your sister's safety, like you didn't know that if you died, I would burn this entire city to the ground. Mia couldn't speak. She had expected anger because she disobeyed him, because she was reckless, because she could have ruined his plan. She hadn't expected him to be angry because she was willing to die. I'm sorry, she whispered again, and this time the tears fell. I didn't know what else to do. I just knew I couldn't let Rose die. I can't lose anyone else. And you think I could survive losing you? Matteo asked, his voice trembling. You think I watched you for 8 months, saved you, protected you, loved you, just to watch you walk into death? What kind of man do you think I am? You love me, Mia asked, her heart skipping a beat. Matteo froze, as if he himself was surprised by what he had said. Then he exhaled, his shoulders sagging, the exhaustion finally visible on his face. I think that's been clear for a long time, he said softly. I love you, Mia Bennett. I don't know when it happened, maybe when I caught you in that meeting, maybe before that. I only know that when you collapsed in my arms, I swore I'd never let you fall again. And tonight, when I read your letter, when I thought about losing you, I realized I can't live in a world without you. Mia closed the distance and wrapped her arms around him, holding him like he might disappear, and she felt him hold her back, strong arms locking around her as if she were the most precious thing in existence. I love you too, she whispered against his chest. I love you knowing exactly who you are. I love you knowing how dangerous your world is, and I'm choosing to stay. Not because I owe you, not because I'm afraid, but because I don't want to live in a world without you. Matteo pulled back, lifted her face, and looked straight into her eyes. Are you sure? Because once you stay, I won't let you go. You'll be mine. Completely. Mia smiled through her tears. I've been yours since the moment you caught me before I fell, and that was all Matteo needed to hear before he kissed her, deep and gentle, and full of promises of a future they both knew wouldn't be easy, but one they were ready to face together. 3 months later, Mia Bennett stood in front of the mirror in the penthouse dressing room and barely recognized the woman looking back at her. The skin that had once been pale from sleepless nights and missed meals was now warm and radiant. The eyes that had once been hollowed out by worry now shone with a happiness she had never believed she deserved. Her glossy brown hair fell over her shoulders above an elegant black suit, and pinned to her lapel was a new name badge. Mia Bennett, Director of Strategic Operations, Valenti Corporation. She had been promoted 2 months earlier, not because she was the CEO's partner, but because Matteo had looked her straight in the eyes and told her she had deserved this position long before he ever met her, and that he was only correcting the failure of those who had chosen to ignore her talent. Mia's new office sat beside Matteo's on the top floor of the 52-story building. She had a team of 15 reporting to her own budget to run projects, and a voice in every senior-level meeting. The people who once treated her like she was invisible now nodded respectfully when she passed, not because they feared Matteo, but because Mia had proven herself over the past 2 months, turning every project she touched into a clear success. Margaret Shaw, the head of HR who had protected Derek, was fired in the first week. The entire HR department was restructured with an anonymous harassment reporting system investigated by an independent third party. Mia had designed that system herself, and Matteo approved it without a single question. Richard Harrison was removed from the board, his assets frozen, and was now sitting in a federal prison awaiting trial on multiple charges ranging from kidnapping to conspiracy to commit murder. As for Derek Harrison, no one knew exactly where he was, only that he had left the city and would never dare return. But the greatest change in Mia's life wasn't her career or her power. It was Rose. Her sister was now completely healthy. The surgery had been 100% successful, the new heart valve working perfectly, and Rose had begun her first semester at Columbia University on a full scholarship that Mia didn't know who had arranged, though she strongly suspected Mateo had something to do with it. Rose lived in a secure apartment near campus with discreet protection watching from a distance, and every weekend she came to the penthouse for dinner with her sister and the man she teasingly called her scary brother-in-law. Mateo pretended to be annoyed every time Rose used that name, but Mia knew he secretly adored the young woman. He hired a tutor when Rose struggled with microeconomics. He sent flowers to her dorm when she passed her midterms. And he threatened to run background checks on any boy who dared get close to Mia's sister. Something Rose found equal parts frightening and hilarious. "We're like a real family now," Rose had said at dinner the week before, her eyes shining with tears. "I can't remember the last time things felt like this. Maybe when Mom was still alive." Mia had held her sister and cried, not from grief, but from a happiness so overwhelming she didn't know what to do with it. Her life had completely transformed in 3 months. From a woman running from debt and violence, she had become a powerful figure standing beside the most powerful man in the city. From someone who hid bruises and swallowed her tears alone, she had become someone so deeply loved and protected that she still sometimes thought she was dreaming. But this wasn't a dream. This was her new life. And every morning she woke beside Mateo, watched the sunlight spill through the penthouse windows, and felt his warmth next to her. Mia knew she wouldn't trade this for anything in the world. That night, after dinner, Mateo led Mia out onto the penthouse balcony. Manhattan stretched beneath them like a shimmering carpet of light. Millions of tiny lamps blinking like fallen stars scattered across the earth. The night breeze brushed gently against them, carrying the first chill of approaching autumn. Yet Mia didn't feel cold at all inside Mateo's arms. He held her from behind, his chin resting on the crown of her head, the two of them standing in silence as they looked out over the city they had survived together through so much darkness. "What are you thinking about?" Mateo asked, his voice low and warm beside her ear. Mia smiled softly. "I'm thinking that 3 months ago, I stood here for the first time, with 3 broken ribs, and no idea if I'd survive until the next day. And now I'm standing here in the arms of the man I love, living a life I never dared to dream of." Mateo turned her to face him, his gray eyes holding a tenderness reserved only for her. "You know," he said, "the day you collapsed in that meeting, I thought I was saving you, but in truth, you were the one who saved me." "Me?" Mia asked in surprise. "I'd been living in the dark for too long," Mateo replied, his hand gently brushing her cheek. "I'd forgotten what it felt like to be loved. I thought I deserved nothing but fear and respect. Then you appeared, with eyes that didn't look at me with fear, with a resilient heart that refused to break, and you reminded me that even a monster can be loved." Suddenly, Mateo dropped to one knee, and Mia forgot how to breathe. From the pocket of his jacket, he took out a black velvet box and opened it, revealing a diamond ring that glittered under the city lights. "I'm not good with beautiful words," Mateo said, his voice trembling slightly. The first time Mia had ever seen the venomous serpent of New York lose his usual confidence. "I'm a killer, a mafia boss, the darkness people fear. I've done terrible things, and I'll do terrible things again to protect the people I love. I'm not perfect. I'm not even good by the world's definition. But I love you. I love you with everything I have, with a heart I thought had been dead for a long time until you brought it back to life. And I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy, protecting you, loving you in the only way I know how. Mia Bennett, will you be my wife?" Tears streamed down Mia's face, but they were tears of pure happiness. She didn't need to think. She'd known the answer long before he asked. "Yes," she whispered, then said it louder. "Yes, Mateo, I will." Mateo slipped the ring onto her finger, stood, and kissed her, deep and gentle, and full of promise for a future they would build together. When they finally pulled apart, Mia looked at the sparkling ring on her hand, and then up at the man she loved. "You know," she said with a smile through her tears, 3 months ago I thought collapsing was the worst thing that could ever happen to me. I was wrong. Falling apart was the best thing that ever happened, because it led me to you." Mateo smiled, a rare smile meant only for her. "And I'll always be here to catch you, no matter how many times you fall." They stood there on the balcony, holding each other beneath the lights of Manhattan, 2 broken pieces shaped by a cruel world who had found each other and become whole. Some women wait for a prince on a white horse to save them. Mia Bennett collapsed into the arms of a devil in an Armani suit and realized that sometimes, when the world has taken everything from you, the protection of a monster is the only salvation that truly matters. because sometimes people don't need the light. They only need a darkness strong enough to shield them from other darkness. And Matteo Valenti, the venomous serpent of New York, was that darkness for Mia. This story offers us profound lessons about life, that sometimes the moments that seem most hopeless are the very beginning of something wonderful. That true strength isn't about never falling, but about daring to stand up after every fall. That love can come from the most unexpected places, and sometimes it takes courage to open your heart and accept it. And most importantly, that no one should have to fight alone, no matter how hard life pushes you into a corner. Did Mia and Matteo's story make you reflect on your own life? Have you ever felt like Mia, carrying everything alone, afraid to trust, afraid to hope for something better? Or have you ever been like Matteo, hiding deep pain behind a hardened exterior? We'd truly love to hear what's in your heart. Please share your thoughts in the comments below so we can read and connect with you more deeply. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss more moving stories like this. Don't forget to like this video and share it with friends and loved ones who might need a little faith in love and hope in life. Every subscription, every like, every share gives us the strength to keep bringing meaningful stories to you each day. Thank you for staying with us until the end of today's story. We wish you and your loved ones good health, a joyful life, and peaceful days ahead. No matter how difficult life becomes, please remember that after the rain, the sky always clears, and sometimes the hands that lift you up come from the most unexpected places. Goodbye, and we'll see you again in the next video.